Well, it's good to see both of you guys. This is really cool because I have a ton of questions for you. But first, why don't you guys just introduce yourselves, starting with David?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Again, thanks for having us. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, live in Charlotte now. I've been a longtime entrepreneur, mostly in the enthusiast audience space. And back in 2004, my partner and I were asked to build out NASCAR's first ever direct-to-fan programming. And so we designed, built, and launched a NASCAR Insider membership. We operated that for over a decade. We brought in 6 million NASCAR fans into a database and 650,000 of them into a credit card on file recurring billing relationship. So we had great success building out, the insider model with a recurring revenue model behind it.
Oh, so I'll dig a little deeper on that, but that's a great lead in. Mr. Flanagan.
Hey there. So Brian and I have known each other a long time. I've also been an entrepreneur based in State College. And David and I met, I own a manufacturing plant when Dave and I met. And Dave and I ventured into another business in the fishing industry. And then when this whole NIL was coming down, Dave kept excitedly calling me and saying, hey, our platform that we used in NASCAR would work in NIL. So I decided to reach out to, my longtime friend, and Brian, you know him as well, Tim Curley, and said, hey, would you like to get involved in this? And so the three of us ventured out and start working in the NIL space, and we've had some success. So it's just an exciting time. It changes every day. But our technology supports collectives, and we handle collectives at Auburn, Iowa, West Virginia, Illinois State, and Penn State is coming out. Michael Krentzman started a collective. Brian, Michael, and that's going to be announced here shortly, called We Are, and it's going to be a football first collective. So we're supporting all these schools, and it's been exciting to work with them. But I figured we'd educate your audience on what a collective is and answer any questions you may have.
Yeah. So let's start with the real neophytes and explain that NIL is name, image, and likeness. There's been so much hubbub about it over the years. And I'll just interject my editorial that it was long overdue. Obviously, the NCAA was being embarrassed into doing something about a very one-sided profits that were going out, and people were up in arms. But it was like the arguments weren't ringing true to me as a former athlete, because there were golfers and tennis players and baseball players getting signed at 16 and 17 years old. So now they are afforded an opportunity to use their own image, take ownership of it. But it seems like I don't want to call it the Wild Wild West, but you mentioned it's changing every day. So how the way your model, Dave, go into a little bit what your model is like. You alluded to it a little bit in your introduction.
Well, I think first thing, Brian, it's important for everyone just to understand the logic trail behind NIL. It's here to stay. That's the first thing everyone has to admit, whether we like it or not. All of us are probably more old school. I mean, we played sports many years ago. I played 2 sports in college at the University of Buffalo. I've been a high school football coach for 19 years. So I've been deeply involved in athletics. And sure, it's a little shocking at first for everyone, but we have to realize it's a 9-0 Supreme Court decision that created this brand new industry. The toothpaste is not going back in the tube. And so it's here. And so I think it's really important that everyone take a logic check around major college sports today. There's the Power 5 conferences today have to understand how to create competitive programs in this new environment. And as we talk to coaches and administrators, they tell us, look, we don't have to win championships every year, but we have to be competitive, because a competitive program has a positive impact on multiple business models. First, the athletic department, their business model rises, the university business model itself, and of course, the local and regional businesses that are tied to that community. All of those business models have success when the core revenue sports are successful.
Right. And specifically, like I'm going to use the Iowa Swarm a little bit in this discussion. And, they use Brad Heinrich, who's the CEO of their collective, was talking about Florida Gulf Coast and all the money that came in, and the new people who were the kids that started applying, the admissions went up. So it has a snowball effect, right?
Yeah, no, that's a positive impact. I mean, it correlates like smoking correlates to lung cancer. It's that strong of a relationship.
in a good way.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. In a good way. So I will tell you that it's important that everyone just admits and has to study now what creates a competitive program for a Power 5 school. And every coach that we talk to says it's players, right? They have to retain their best players, and they have to attract great players from the transfer portal and from high school. And so if we all believe that you just can't coach your way to a competitive Power 5 program year after year, certainly you'll develop some diamonds in the rough. But if we believe the basis is retaining and attracting players, then we have to ask ourselves, right, what is the decision criteria today for great players? How are those players making decisions to stay at their university or to go to a new university, either from the transfer portal out of high school? And as I coach kids who are Power 5 recruits, I can tell you that their criteria doesn't change much early on in the recruiting process. They still want a great coach, a great conference, great facilities, great campus, probably great climate. All those things are important. But when they narrow the list down to 3 or 4 or 5 schools, the number one criteria at that point becomes the NIL offer. What type of opportunities do they have for their name, image, and likeness at that university? And it matters because all the other boxes are already checked.
Right.
So that's a realization people haven't really come to yet.
Right.
And if they do, they will flock to support the program. Administrators will, supporters will, businesses will.
No question. And this is first year really of full on NIL. This freshman class essentially is the first class that's had that extra factor added in. And so because, and a lot of people may not know this, the in the workings, the university cannot directly act as representatives for these athletes. So that's where you guys as a collective come in, correct? And just talk about all the things that you are responsible for.
Yeah, I think there's two things that really govern NIL today. The first is athletes can't get paid by the university. And by extension, employees and vendors, universities cannot take dollars and directly or indirectly pay athletes. So that's really the first rule. And the second rules we all hear about constantly is pay for play. You can't compensate a player based on his ability to play or his willingness to play for your school. So those are really the two, I would say, only governing rules in NIL today.
Right. And there's a couple things that I really wanted to point out. And number one is again, like the Iowa Swarm example, where it's football, men's and women's basketball, correct? And do you guys see that it's going to trickle down to some of the other non-revenue producing sports? Like I just foresee the Olympic sports really benefiting from this, like that gymnast, the track star. So they will trickle down, but this is that you're essentially the football, the revenue producing sports are essentially the guinea pigs for how to mass or scale, I guess.
Yes, certainly they're leading the way. Eventually, all teams, all players will have opportunities for NIL deals. It'll just be relative, right? It's relative to the size of the school, relative within the school, to the program and its following and fan base. At some schools, baseball is a great draw. In others, like Penn State, wrestling has great support, fan support.
Right.
So every school will have a different equation once you get past the primary revenue generators, right? Which is football and then men's and women's basketball.
Right. And I love that there seems to be a charity component to it also. Right.
Yeah, we see collectives forming different types of organizations. LLCs. Most of them are declared not-for-profit LLCs, although not officially designated as a nonprofit. And then there are schools who have nonprofits, either 501c3s or 501c4s. Correct.
Yeah. So let me ask you, let's pretend I'm in a time machine and we're going back to 1984 and I'm getting recruited by Penn State. And I wasn't, a top 100 player, whatever. And even before the NIL came, I just thought about if I were in a position, because the arguments where there's going to be some guys on the team that make more money, but there seems to be at least an attempt to have an equal amount going out to the athletes, but there's an opportunity, say like a Caitlin Clark at Iowa, like she's going to have opportunities because she is the best, in my opinion, best player in college basketball, female player or male player. Really, she should be able to be compensated more. There'll be a baseline, but there's going to be other opportunities, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I would think back to your original first days on campus, first month on campus. What was that like? It was chaos, right? I mean, you're jumping right into your sport, your training. You're going through your syllabus, the related curriculum, first classes, homework, test. I mean, it's overwhelming for a student athlete. And Brian, I think this is where collectives have the greatest value. So that first day on campus, if you're not the 5-star recruit, quarterback that's knocking down the big NIL deal because you had an agent when you're a senior in high school, you're walking on campus as a great player in a great program. You'd like to understand a pathway to earn money through your name, image, and likeness.
Right.
And it's the collective that will ultimately create the efficiencies for you to do that. Right. And really bring opportunities to you. And people have to understand the real value that these collectives have. If you have to do that on your own, if every athlete has to go pursue their own deals, even going into a marketplace that maybe the athletic department is set up, you still have to deal with that business directly. And by the way, just as hard, they have to deal with you directly and hundreds of other individual athletes. And that model, which is the model that really launched last July, created chaos on campus. You had businesses knocking on locker room doors every day, dozens of them trying to get athletes to sign I-9s or W-9s or sign a new agreement or scope of work, or say, hey, you didn't show up, for your television commercial. You didn't show up to our personal appearance. And that was a very inefficient market that was created over a year ago now. And really, collectives have stepped in to intermediate the market and create efficiencies.
Right. So the athlete immediately has the collective at their beck and call to, let's say, they represent them in any NIL deal, looks at all the legal, the documentation, essentially gives them, all right, well, this is what you can be compensated for. There's appearances. I was a athlete representative. I was in charge of getting them their endorsement deals, like pro athletes, like Del Curry, getting them a car deal, and they would have to show up 3 times a year for 2 hours to sign autographs. So you guys would be playing that role for the student athletes, correct?
We wouldn't directly, but the collectives will. We provide technologies that support collectives. And I think it's important for everyone to understand the types of models and relationships a collective has with an athlete. The 2 primary models we see is that a collective can sign an athlete into an agreement and intermediate their rights. Very similar to the way IMG Learfield has intermediated marketing assets of athletic departments for decades. Collectives can execute a contract with an athlete, guarantee them a monthly payment, whatever that dollar amount might be,
Right.
in exchange for consideration. And the consideration is generally their NIL assets. So, for example, they'll say, okay, Brian, we're going to bring you on as a member in our collective, as an athlete. So you can sign this agreement. We'll pay you X dollars per month. And you have deliverables for us each month. You have to sign 100 autographs. You have to do 20 social media posts. You have to show up to 2 meet and greets, 2 business endorsement activities, and so forth. And then every month they're going to manage that list with you to ensure that you're actually performing against those obligations. Because if you don't, it's a pay for play violation. And of course, every month you'll receive that payment from them. So there's a true legal agreement because you sign an agreement that has payment for consideration. And that consideration is a set of obligations of your NIL rights that you have to perform. Now, on the other side of that equation, now that the collective owns your NIL assets, and not exclusively, but whatever set they put in that scope of work, the collective can now take those assets to market, right? They can go to local and regional, national, regional businesses. They can go to individual supporters, anyone who would like to spend money and support the collective in exchange for receiving those athletes' NIL assets.
Right.
Or in exchange for having a closer relationship to that athlete than the general public can.
Right. You mentioned you guys at your technology, you actually have the ability to integrate like the invoices and the appearances and things like that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we provide all the infrastructure for collectives. Collectives go through a couple stages, right? First, the organizational stage, they try to figure out, hey, who's going to do this? And, what's the seed capital requirement? How much money do we need to put into this new company to get it started for employees and, other expenses? So we'll work with those collectives through their organizational stage as they move towards the launch stage. And we'll provide all the infrastructure. And there's 3 general tool sets that we provide. One is an athlete onboarding system. So the ability to manage agreements with those athletes, create an official system of records, store those athletes, store those records for those athletes, onboard the athletes' primary information that they need in their systems to make sure they manage them properly, pay them properly, et cetera.
Taxes, pay the taxes correctly.
Yeah, that is in our payment system. The second system, though, for us is the obligation management system. Once you put an athlete under contract, imagine doing this with hundreds of athletes.
Right.
Every athlete has a contract, sometimes multiple contracts. Each contract for every athlete has deliverables. Could be 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 deliverables per contract. All of that needs to be managed by the collective. So we created an obligation management system so the athlete and the collective themselves can manage those obligations.
Right.
For the athlete, we create a mobile app so the athlete can constantly check in and see what obligations they have outstanding and how to go execute those. And then, of course, once the athletes have executed their obligations, it's time for payment, whether it's a monthly payment or in some cases it's a project. They'll sign a specific contract for a specific project. And when all the obligations are fulfilled, the collective will pay that athlete. So we provide an athlete payment system for our collectives that transacts the ACH directly to the athlete's account that they set up. It gives them a report, an itemized report of all the obligations that were fulfilled tied to that payment. That report can also go to compliance. Then we have a tax holdback for the athlete. So they can choose, of course, to hold back 25 or 30 or 35% of which we'll send to them just prior to tax day next April. And then we provide all the 1099 management for the collectives as well.
That is so huge, and also is one of the intended or unintended consequences is these kids are learning how to be self-sufficient adults, because when they get out into the real world, they're going to be paying their taxes. And I think what a lot of people also forget is there are students at the university who have total freedom to go out and, let's say a cybersecurity genius, go out and earn, right, for their expertise because they've been working on computers since they're 8 years old, correct? So now this is affording the athlete who has worked and perfected their specialty to benefit from it while they're playing. And also it'll help, you hope that there's going to be something left after they finish playing when they get out into the real world and start having to make more money, right?
Yep. You know, Brian, what I find interesting is because I speak to a lot of the coaches, and the coaches got this very early on. For example, Franny McCaffrey at Iowa, I called him on a cell. He's like, yeah, we need help. And he's the one who introduced me to Brad, who was just getting it started. And I don't know if you know, Brad lives real close to
Fort Myers, right?
Yeah. So Brad and I got together, and that's how we created the Iowa Swarm, the actual website and all the technology behind it. But you know, these coaches get it. For example, Pat Chambers had a one-day coaches symposium last week, and he had me speak, and there were, you know, probably 7 or 9 coaches. BU, Fordham, Ergo was there. And what was interesting, the whole morning was spent on NIL. And then in the afternoon, it was coaches talking about defense and offense and plays. But I said to Dave afterwards, I was amazed that they committed that much time. And when I talked to my brother-in-law, I said, you know, I was surprised. He said, listen, I believe as a Division I coach, I have to be a specialist in NIL because that's where it's headed. So the coaches that get this early on are going to have successful programs. And that's the other side of it that's kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, well, number one, you're going to have to be, as Dave mentioned at the top, and you've just mentioned about be competitive. Coaches now have to be almost like general managers, not just because of the NIL, but because of the transfer portal, right? So this just allows them, and I can totally see why they would get it, because the early adapters are going to be the ones that are going to be successful at it and have successful programs. And as Dave said, it's here to stay. So you might as well embrace it and give yourself a competitive advantage out there, right? And so Mike, you're talking to the coach. Are they the schools that you guys have brought in? Are they creating it different? Everyone doing it in a different way? Like I know Brad wasn't originally the guy, but he seemed to be the one that wanted to take the reins and get it going. And he's the CEO. For those that don't know, he's the CEO of Iowa Swarm Collective, right? And
yeah, Brad played golf at Iowa and is very successful business career. So he's the guy who funded it basically. And then what we see at a lot of these, they're bringing people over that have maybe worked in the athletic department as a fundraiser, but are very familiar with the coaches and the athletic department. So he brought over a baseball coach who then got into fundraising at Iowa, and Scott is running the day-to-day operations. So we see that consistently. But we see some cool things like, you know, that some of them have a mental health, which I think is tremendous, a mental health option for the students.
Right.
So there's all kinds of really good things besides just the money that are benefiting these student athletes.
Yeah. So you were talking about the universities. How are you guys synergizing with like the athletic development, things like that? I know they're totally two separate entities, but there has to be some crossover. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a big topic. We talk a lot about coaches understanding the importance of NIL. Administrators are slower to come around. You know, many of them are still defending the practices of the status quo as if this truly didn't happen. But you know, the best departments, those who will have the most success, really in the short term. This is not a long-term solution. They have to get behind it immediately because the next recruiting season is right around the corner, right? December signing period for football is coming. And athletic directors, administrators, they have to learn how to cooperate and participate in this arena, right? There's certain restrictions they have because they are the university, right? They can't play players. Now they're loosening the reins around facilitation. And I think it's really important that athletic departments work cooperatively with their collectives. They really need to have a synergistic relationship. And they need to understand that, business development practices are changing. They used to raise large amounts of monies for capital campaigns.
Right.
And today, look, they'll still build good facilities, but they have to understand that those wealthy supporters who are fanatical about their athletic program need to support the collective, because the collective plays a huge role in helping coaches maintain a competitive roster.
Right. And organizationally, I mean, I've been on the administrative side too of a university. They don't have the bandwidth or expertise to do what you guys are doing. So if they're coming from a position of abundance, that is going to benefit them. If they're coming at it from a position of scarcity, I think they both lose, because you're going to have a heavy donor who, yeah, I want to see those nice facilities. I want to sit in the nice seats, but I also want to be able to spend a special event getting to talk to such and such an athlete for whatever the event may be. Talk about that a little bit, like some of the events that you guys can coordinate that makes it special and makes it worth someone donating whatever, 5,000, 2,000, 5,000. I know at Iowa you can go give as low as $200. Go
Dave,
talk about that a little bit.
I think a perfect example, kind of parlaying into what you initially said, was what they're doing at North Carolina, where now we see an athletic department that's starting to get it. And they have an annual, I'll call it, because of Penn State, or a blue-white basketball scrimmage, which was traditionally run by the athletic department. And now what they're saying, hey, collective, you can run it. And all the proceeds from the game, the blue-white game, or at North Carolina, you can be in our facility to have the scrimmage, and all the money goes to you so you can pay the players. And that's what you're going to start seeing more and more of. The athletic departments that get ahead of it are going to win.
Yeah, because it comes all the way back around that the big picture is to benefit the university and its exposure, and they're winning, quite frankly, because at the end of the day, winning is what it's all about, right?
Well, I mean, even donors would prefer to have those really nice seats with a 10-2 football team instead of a 2-10 football team. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It comes down to the logic we discussed earlier, that everyone, the athletic administrators and coaches, everyone's responsible for building a competitive program.
Right.
And it floats all boats at the university, right? It floats the athletic department, the university, and the local economy. So it's important to understand that the ingredients, the key components of creating a competitive program have changed. It changed literally overnight. It's like when they broke up Ma Bell, right? The Bell companies.
Right.
It's a decision. It happened. A whole new marketplace and a whole new way of doing business was created, and that's where we are today with NIL.
So if I am a university athletic administrator around the country, and just really need some guidance, they should be reaching out to you guys just as an opening conversation. Hey, how are you doing this? How should we do it? And who is that person that you like? I have a wide reach of people that are friends or whatever. What is that position, or does it vary from university to university, that would benefit from hearing how you do it and why you do it?
Yeah, I think it should be a combination of the administration and the coaches sitting in one room. The athletic director, head of business development, the head of the university IP, right? The marks that'll play a key role in NIL value. Those key stakeholders should be sitting in a room with coaches. We'd love to get in a room with those two groups together and just talk through the logic and educate them as to what we're seeing in the marketplace and how collectives are being successful, and their role in supporting NIL, not just from player perspective around education and branding, all the things that you can do as a university, but also they can support it They can support the collective, who ultimately is going to create an effective and efficient NIL program for all athletes on campus.
So two questions, you can answer them both. As it applies to you, where do you see, like, what does it look like in the dream to you for REKT Global? And then where do you see the whole NIL nationally? What does that look like? Or that might be too broad a question, but just give me your.
Yeah, no, it's
Dave, if I could point out, REKT Global, Brian, was bought out by a company called Infinite Reality, which is a metaverse company. So Dave will touch on that and how we see the metaverse playing into college athletics as well. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, we mentioned the two early stages of a collective, right? The organizational stage and the launch stage. But they're all going to go next into the sustainability stage. They're going to have to create these cycles of success that can build ample war chests for the collective to help coaches retain and attract the best players through a really rich NIL program. And by rich, I don't mean dollars all the time, right? But it's rich.
Robust.
Yeah, robust program. So that sustainability model, that's a long, hard road getting into sustainability. It's easy for a few wealthy individuals to reach deep in their pocket to get things started and maybe put $2, $4, $10, $15 million together for a collective. But eventually that money's going to be spent. It's going to be spent with athletes, and they're going to have to reload. And that's where it's going to get really tough, the long road. We don't see, in the sustainability world, we don't see a world where the same benefit, the same donors are reaching deep in their pocket, that small group. We don't see a world where there's endowments that's created, because we believe in a Power 5 program, you're going to need somewhere between $5 million and $20 million annually to be competitive.
Right.
And so those are large numbers, right? So there's only a few pathways they can actually create those kind of revenues every year. One is through individuals supporting the collective, becoming members, right? And subscribing to the program at premium price point levels, $10,000 a year, $5,000, et cetera.
Right.
Then there's local, regional, national businesses that are going to spend their marketing budgets with the collective to gain access to those NIL assets we talked about that the collective now owns. And we also believe long-term collectives will become content creators. They'll create sponsored content that local, regional, national businesses can spend their marketing budgets with. Past that, we believe that there's a small amount that can be made in the merchandise business. But really, that's just the icing on top. It takes an awful lot of T-shirts and jersey sales to create enough margin for a $5 to $20 million war chest every year.
Right.
We believe there will be some new revenue streams that happen through the metaverse. It's one of the reasons we're so excited about being acquired by Infinite Reality, is that Web3 and the metaverse will present a whole new content distribution channel and enable all new sorts of content to be placed in that distribution network. And that content and the distribution of content in the metaverse is going to lead to, we believe, very significant new revenues.
Yeah, you picked two questions. Number one, and this is a quick answer, the businesses that get involved, they do have the opportunity to write it off as marketing dollars. Is that in general correct?
Depending on how they're spending with the collective. But yes, if they're buying NIL assets to use to promote their products and services, certainly.
Right. And then the bigger picture that you're talking about, the metaverse and things like that, I see that your parent company is, like investors are former athletes who are gamers. So that's the direction you're seeing it going, or the potential for growth.
Well, gaming really helped facilitate the birth of the modern metaverse. And so what you see in the gaming engines that give you this mixed reality, photorealistic experience, that will be carried into Web3 and the new metaverse And that will create really interesting content, really great social experiences, and a whole new world of commerce.
So have you had any pain? What have been your pains as you're navigating these murky waters? Just give me like two that you want to discuss. How about that?
Yeah. Early on was just uncertainty, right? And I see the pain of collectives who are entering this insane world that's brand new. The workload is immense. These are people who are very successful in running other businesses, by the way. They could be doing a lot with their free time and money, and they choose to go support their favorite athletic program. And I watch the pain they go through in working with the university at first, because honestly, most university administrations were resisting this. They were trying to figure out, but they were almost wanted to, straight arm it and pretend it exists.
Right.
Not many people opened up their arms and said, come on in, let's figure this out together. So I watched them go through that organizational pain. And then as they've launched, we've watched them with this huge burden of activities around managing contracts, deliverables, athletes. And so it's a lot of work. They're small staffs today because they want as much of the money as possible to go to athletes. So
right.
it's a huge burden. And that's been tough to watch.
Right. And so you guys you provide a plug and play solution to these universities that's going to help them, as you said, like yesterday, catch up with all these other schools that jumped out ahead and were essentially giving themselves a competitive advantage. So you guys can offer them that relief of that pain.
Yeah, exactly.
We support the collectives, not the universities, but we have a plug and play technology platform that's been proven for 18 years. And if universities are starting collectives, that's where we come in. And if I could just expand a little bit more, Dave, on the metaverse, because I find it fascinating.
Just knowing you, Mike, I hate to interrupt, but just knowing you, just hearing you say metaverse, I'm almost tearing up.
You know what's even worse than that is hearing Tim Curley talk about the metaverse.
Okay, got it. So go
He's
ahead.
our
I'm
metaverse
sorry.
king at this point. But, we look at, just for example, Penn State, because I'm familiar with it. We have 750,000 alumni, living alumni. 110,000 of them go to the game. This metaverse, and we've seen it, we've seen examples. That's why can now create a like for like, peer for peer experience in Beaver Stadium parking lot, Beaver Stadium, where your buddies can get together in the metaverse and tailgate before a game, and then enter the stadium, buy merchandise. It's just fascinating to me. And if you would have asked Tim or I 2 years ago if we even think about talking about it, it's just crazy. But we've actually seen it, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I can only imagine the possibilities that are there for a university. I'm getting down to a couple of, if I'm an alumni, let's say a Brad Heinrich type that wanted to create a collective at my university, how would they get in contact with you?
Dave, I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, certainly they can reach out by email at any point in time. dhickson at rektglobal, rektglobal.com. And we'll certainly connect with them. They can go to our microsite inside the Infinite Reality site, which is exchangefactor.com. Exchange is spelled without the E in our world. It's just capital X, Change Factor. But we'd love to, anyone who's forming a collective or listening to this that would like to form a collective, we can certainly help guide you. We have a ton of experience in dealing with Power 5 collectives. We're now working into Group of 5. So we're really excited about what the future holds.
Right, and that would go for a coach too. They can reach out to you, but with those same, and I'll put those on the when I post this. I'll put that contact information on.
Brian, I mean, for me, I think Mike, I speak for Mike too, especially coaches, especially athletic administrators who want to take a more progressive look at how to really support a collective and create a successful NIL offering. I mean, those are the people who's we're here to support them, right? Really, this is all about coaches and administrators building competitive programs. It's just that, how to do that, that formula's changed a bit. And
No
so
question.
we see it every day. We'd love to talk to those are the real stakeholders that we'd love to talk to.
Yeah, just from my perspective, again, as a former athletic administrator at a major university, I would never go back to that life, but it would have been cool to be the person who could leave a legacy and say, hey, you know what? When NIL came in, I embraced it. I talked to Dave HIckson and Mike Flanagan, and we created this collective at United States U, and now it's grown to this. And that's for me. I would think that as an athletic administrator or even a coach, that's the bonus, right? Because they've created the path for the future of all universities, because it's just exploding and it's going forward, and either you're going to jump on board or your university's going to suffer in the end. Not to be as fatalistic about it, but that's just the facts, right?
We truly believe that. We really do believe it. It's why we jump out of bed every day early in the morning and work till late at night, because we believe it's that important.
Right. Well, any last thoughts before we finish up? Because this really has been fascinating for me, because I couldn't wrap my head around how everything works with NIL, but now I have a really good picture about it.
Well, just Brian, you have my email, so mine's mflanagan@rektglobal.com. But other than that, we really appreciate you interviewing us today. And
Mike, your job is to make sure it's more than football in the next several years.
Oh, no doubt.
At Penn State, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
You got it. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.